Okay, so let's look at example 3. So in example 3, we have two groups, group A and group B. Group A is given the manual toothbrush. Group B is given the electric toothbrush. And the people in group A are asked to come now, where I would test them for their plaque score. They're asked to come again in 3 months, again in 6 months, and again in 12 months. So this is considered repeated study or repeated measure because I'm testing them repeatedly, testing them now. I'm testing them in 3 months, again in 6 months, and again in 12 months. How many groups do we have? Group A, Group B, 2 groups. So when we have 2 groups or 2 conditions and we are repeating the study several times, it's called match pair t-test. That's the test that we're gonna give. So let's write that down, matched pair t-test. Okay, let's look at example 4. Here we have 3 groups. Group A is given the manual toothbrush. Group B is given the electric toothbrush. Group C, the third group, is given no toothbrush. And I asked them to come now. I'll test their plaque score. I'll ask them to come again in 3 months, again in 6 months, and again in 12 months. The same applies for Group B, who are given the electric toothbrush. They'll come now to test for the plaque score again in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Same thing with Group C. So when we have 3 groups, okay, so 3 groups, and we're doing repeated measures or testing them repeatedly during different intervals, that is a repeated measures 2 conditions. So it's ANOVA. The reason why it falls in this category, in the parametric category, is because plaque score is considered numerical. It's a number. It's a quantitative data. So if we look at this chart over here, the type of data is quantitative. So ratio or interval, when you think of that, think of numbers. So plaque score is recorded in numbers. That's why it falls under this column. So the test that we're giving over here is one-way repeated measures ANOVA. Repeated because we're repeating it many times, and it has 3 groups, more than 2 groups. So this is our test. One-way repeated measures ANOVA. Okay. Let's move on to example 5. Here we are testing gender and educational levels, and I'm asking 30 people. So maybe 15 people are in group A and they're male. 15 people could possibly be in group B and they're female, so gender, male and female. And I want to test their educational level. I want to find out the educational level. Do they have high school education? Do they have college education? Or do they have university education? And same thing for female. So let's look at the type of information, the type of data that I'm getting. This over here, this is the data that I'm collecting. They're going to let me know whether they're in high school, college, or university. Is that quantitative? Is that answered in numbers? Or is that qualitative, where that's answered in words? You look over here, non-parametric is when we have qualitative data. This type of data, educational level, is considered ordinal because it's been ranked. High school is not as educated, college is mid-level education, university is well educated, hypothetically speaking. So because we know the types of data is ordinal, it falls under this column over here. We're going to use a non-parametric test. A non-parametric test means that they use qualitative data. How many groups do we have? 1, 2. 2 groups. So 2 groups is an independent measure because I have not asked you anywhere that I'll be asking them repeatedly over, a span of 5 years. I might ask them in year 1, what's their education level? I might ask them again in year 2 or year 3. I have not said that at all. In here, I have just said that I'm only testing them once. It's implied that I'm only testing them once. So the type of test that I would use here is 2 groups, testing them one independent measure, Mann-Whitney test. Okay, let's look at a different example. Let's look at example 6. So example 6 is we're looking at age ranges and educational level. So we have 3 groups, group A, group B, group C. So group A has young people in it, group B has, 36 to 64 years of people in it, group C are seniors, 65 plus. And I want to know what their educational level is. So again, let's look at the type of data we're going to collect. Educational level is considered ordinal. When we have ordinal data, it falls under the non-parametric test, so it's one of these tests. Now let's figure out how many groups we have. We have 1, 2, 3. 3 groups, so let's look over here. 3 groups, more than 2 groups, and I'm only getting the answer once. I'm only asking them once. I'm not going to ask them again next year or the year after. I'm only asking them once. The type of test, according to this table, is the Driscoll-Wallace test. Okay, let's move on to another example. So here we have example 7. We're looking at gender and educational levels. And again, I'm going to ask around 30 people. So group A is male, group B, female, and I'm asking for their educational level. This is the important part here. I'm going to ask them now in 2020. I'm going to ask them again in 2025 and again in 2030. This right away tells you that it's a repeated measures test. It means it's a repeated study. I'm going to repeat this study again in 2025 and in 2030. So when 2025 comes along, I'm going to go back to these group and ask them what level education do they have now. And same thing in 2030, I'll go back to this group and ask them what level of education do they have now. So how many groups do we have? 1, 2. We have 2 groups. And it's repeated. We're repeating the test. When we have 2 groups and we're repeating the test, it's a Wilcoxon test. Let's look at the last example, which is example 8. Here we have 3 groups. We're asking ordinal data, because we're ranking this. High school is not as educated as college. People in college are not as well educated as people in university. And we're asking these individuals in these groups, in these 3 groups, many times. We've asked them in 2015, we've also asked them in 2017, in 2019, and now we want to ask them in 2021. And them 4 times. How many groups do we have? 3. So more than 3 groups and repeated measures because we've been asking them several times. The type of that test is the Friedman's test. So I hope this solidifies your understanding of figuring out which test to use when given a situation. Thank you, guys.